Good afternoon, this is Sean Golding with Golding & Golding, here to discuss some of the basics of the new Offshore Voluntary Disclosure Program. Unfortunately, there's a bunch of horrible information online. It's inaccurate, and it's designed to fearmonger or scare taxpayers when that's not necessary. So why don't we go through the new Offshore Voluntary Disclosure Program and how it works. So the traditional Voluntary Disclosure Program, or VDP, has been on the books forever. And due to the increase or the surge of offshore cases and the U.S. government going after people who have unreported offshore accounts, assets, investments, there was an offshoot of the program that was designed, I think, back in 08 or 09. It was OVDI and then changed to OVDP. It was primarily for taxpayers who had offshore unreported assets and income. You could also include your domestic in there as well, but that program ended in September of 2018. But that doesn't mean offshore voluntary disclosures ended. In fact, what happened is the Internal Revenue Service revised or updated, expanded the voluntary disclosure program in order to delve deeper into offshore related matters. So why don't we take a few minutes here and go through some of the important aspects of the offshore aspects or the offshore version of the voluntary disclosure program and give you an idea of what you should know. The first thing to keep in mind, the first question we often get is, can you avoid criminal prosecution? And the answer is almost always. So the idea is, if you make a full disclosure under the voluntary disclosure program, you could typically avoid any criminal investigation or prosecution beyond the submission. In other words, if the IRS finds you in an audit, let's say you're in an eggshell audit or other type of sensitive audit, and they think you did something, non-kosher, they can refer to the special agents, and then that can turn into a special agent investigation, turns into criminal investigation, criminal prosecution, et cetera, et cetera. When you voluntarily submit to the Voluntary Disclosure Program, VDP, for undisclosed offshore assets, investments, and income, you're basically voluntarily going into the IRS and saying, hey, these are mistakes that I've made in the past. When you're doing VDP under the revised version of the program, it is for people who are willful or just can't disclose under penalty of perjury that you're non-willful. Under prior OVDP, plenty of non-willful people used to go into that program because you could opt out of the penalty and you would get a closing letter for 8 years of amended tax returns, and that appeal to certain types of taxpayers. So if you go into the new VDP and you make a full disclosure, we've never had anyone criminally prosecuted in any of the offshore disclosure cases that we voluntarily submitted in our history, and we've done thousands between streamlined delinquency, OVDP, VDP, et cetera, et cetera. Another common question is immigration status, right? So someone is either on a green card, or they're getting their green card, or they're going to become naturalized, or they're going to take the exam, and the question becomes, well, if you submit to the program, is your immigration status at risk? 99% of the time, no. The idea is you're voluntarily coming in there. You're making a representation about a certain non-compliance you've had in prior years. The IRS doesn't normally just run off and refer you to the USCIS for deportation or removal. It doesn't really work that way. If you did something incredibly horrible, criminal, illegal money, you didn't fully disclose to the program, and they find you, I guess, you would probably get prosecuted and potentially removed. But just by submitting to the program shouldn't really have any impact on your immigration status. Can you disclose illegally sourced money? No. The IRS is not a cleaners, right? You can't take money that you illegally sourced overseas, run it through the IRS Voluntary Disclosure Program, and then clean that money and make it legal. The idea is it has to be legally sourced money. Those are three important submission factor questions we get often. Some other common issues are just things you should keep in mind. Full disclosure is required. So a lot of times we'll have a client come in, hey, I've got these 8 accounts, and one account is with a bank my great-great-great-grandma has been using forever in Italy or France or Jamaica or wherever, and they would never report me to the IRS. It just would never happen. Well, you never know. Maybe you do a transfer out of that account, and FATCA trail can happen. So you're required to make a full disclosure. If you don't make a full disclosure, then the IRS can come back after you and say, hey, this wasn't done correctly. You withheld information from us, and then they could probably go after you for criminal increased penalties, things like that. One final thing to keep in mind is under the OVDP, traditional OVDP, let's call it, prior to 2018, they had opt-outs. And so basically what would happen is there were set amounts of penalty, 27.5 or 50% of any of it was in a bad bank, and et cetera, et cetera. If you disagreed with that penalty, well, you could stay in the program, and then you can try to opt out to try to get the penalty reduced. Unfortunately, in some situations, it could increase the penalty. Under the new version of the program, everyone basically goes through an audit, but more often than not, it's just a 30 to 60 minute Q&A from the agent assigned to the case to get some background. Agents do have discretion to mitigate damages. Unfortunately, with the new crop of cases that recently came out and the changing to the willful FBAR regulation, it might get a little tighter, but you don't have to technically opt out in order to try to make your play to the agent to try to get the penalty reduced. If you're going to submit, you should use experienced counsel. Use someone who's board certified and specializes in this area. There's board certified specialists that handle 30 different areas at the same time. And well, you probably want someone who specializes specifically in offshore matters. Again, VDP is for people who are willful or can't certify under penalty of perjury that they're non-willful. If you're non-willful, there's various other easier programs you can submit to. There are the streamlined procedures, domestic and offshore. There's reasonable cause and delinquency. We have lots of free information available on our main websites. We have articles authored all over the internet. You can always reach out and schedule a reduced fee initial consultation if you feel it's appropriate and it's something that we handle here. Again, my name is Sean Golding with Golding & Golding. Thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.